Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege and an honor to be in your midst in this historic, magical land of Bali. It's almost a place where it all began. Indonesia, one of the pioneers of LNG exports way back in the 1970s. And truly it's an honor to be discussing the LNG perspectives with you and set the tone for an exciting next couple of days. What I'll be doing is sharing our perspectives on what the outlook is and also zero in on what the implications are for LNG players, starting with the global outlook and then narrowing down into Southeast Asia so that it's relevant to all of us. I'd like to leave you with 5 key messages. Overall, we are in a privileged generation where there's an energy transition happening and at the same time the 4th industrial revolution or the digital revolution as it's called. And that is going to change the way we live in a profound manner. So first, the global energy demand is decelerating. It's growing at a rate that was not seen in the last 100 years, slower than what was seen in the last 100 years. But Asia is a hotspot. ASEAN is a hotspot. India is a hotspot. China has continued to grow, though it will peak. Second, though energy overall is growing relatively modestly, electricity, on the other hand, is growing at 4 times the rate of energy. And that's driven by a range of factors: electric vehicles, gas being converted to electricity. And within electricity growth, 80% of new additions are renewables. It's solar and wind. So the march of renewables is unstoppable. That's message number 2. In this backdrop, gas is the only fossil fuel which is steadily growing. So all of us over here, there is a future. And it's growing, driven by several uses. You could have peaker for renewables. Power generation is a big driver, and other uses of gas that are picking up. LNG growth is also growing. It's becoming more liquid. New markets opening up. We'll share that. And overall, that brings us to message number 4. Given this new growth, continued growth of gas, new growth of demand markets, existing supply declining, you are seeing big supply hubs emerging. Australia is likely to overtake Qatar as the world's largest LNG supplier in the next 3 years or 4 years. The US volume will be needed in the Pacific, and that will become the marginal price setter. And what prices could that, what costs and therefore what prices could that imply? That's an open area. And last but not the least, there are a new set of buyers who are emerging, which is different from the traditional Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the cozy LNG club that existed. These buyers need affordable energy. They have different requirements, timing requirements, and therefore that's translating into different contracting behavior. So those are the aspects we will cover in the next 15 to 20 minutes. It's going to be a whirlwind tour, and I invite you on this journey with me. As I said, in the next, up to 2050, energy growth is going to slow down to a rate that was not seen till the early 1900s. If you notice, way back between 1950 to 2000, energy grew at about 3%. First part of 2000, it grew at around 2.92%, driven by Chinese growth. But now as China peaks, energy intensity decreases, you see a slower rate of energy growth. However, the Asian picture is very different. I think the IGU president mentioned that as well. Almost all that growth in energy is coming from Asia. Though China grows, it peaks somewhere in the middle of the decade. ASEAN, India, Africa, they continue to grow at about 2% for the next 15 years, 2.9% for the next 15 years, about 2% up to 2050 thereon. So therefore, there's very healthy growth in Asia. And we are privileged to be in this happening market. Message number 2, as I said, electrification is growing 4 times the rate of which normal energy is growing. And we are seeing seismic shifts in the use of energy. Transportation, 15 years from now, is going to be very different from what it is today. Electric vehicles penetration is likely to dramatically increase. Several countries, and not just OECD, even countries like India and China, are experimenting with or exploring banning internal combustion engines somewhere after between 2030 and 2040. Whether that will happen, when that will happen, it's more a question of when rather than if. Similarly, on heating appliances for buildings, a lot of users are converting from gas to electric heat pumps, electric appliances, particularly in the developing world, lesser use for gas, more use for electricity. So therefore, electricity growth increasing rapidly. And what is different about this electricity growth is that 80% of the new additions, and this is new additions of electricity broken down by country, by type, and you'd see that 80% of this is renewables, and half of it is coming from China and India. Any guesses how much of solar capacity, only solar capacity, China added in 2017? It's 50 gigawatt. So China added 50 gigawatt of solar capacity in 1 year in 2017. In 2017 was another marked year. In India, finally the prices of the latest solar auctions dropped to below new build coal plants in some of the auctions. So therefore, we are seeing a profound shift where renewable is becoming the cheapest new build option for all power going forward. We've actually modeled this region by region in China, and at least 3 out of the 7 regions, renewable will be the cheapest new build option going forward. So therefore, the march of renewables is unstoppable. What implication does this have for fossil fuels? So overall, you would see fossil fuel demand plateauing and peaking. Coal, we expect, would peak somewhere in the mid-2025, 2027 range. Indonesia, by the way, will continue to, and India will continue to grow coal as they should in the energy mix. Oil, we think, could plateau around 2035, could be sooner based on some scenarios, particularly based on a faster electric vehicles uptake. Oil in transportation itself may peak in 2027. Gas, on the other hand, will continue to increase. Will continue to steadily increase at around 1% year on year. There could be some disruptors to gas demand, particularly if storage technology improves and becomes cheaper, then the gas application for peaking could decrease. But that's a scenario that we are modeling, but even in that scenario, we do see that gas will continue to increase. So therefore, in the fossil fuel portfolio, gas is where you should be, and that's where this room is. And what does this mean for LNG? We are going to see a continued growth for LNG. We are, as you all know, we are in an oversupplied environment. We think the market will tighten around 2022 to 2025, depending on a range of factors, one of which being just continued demand in emerging economies, Bangladesh, India, ASEAN, China, one of the biggest growth markets of 2017. Also, slower, more decline in existing gas fields, and also some other disruptors which are which only some people in the world know, which is, for example, the nuclear startup in Japan. What rate is that going to come up? And we'd love to hear from our Japanese colleagues later in the day and what impact that would have on gas markets. But net, we do see LNG continuing to grow quite steadily and quite fast, and tightening around 2022, 2023. By 2030, we think about 120 to 150 MTPA of new supply will need to come in to bridge the gap. So there will be more projects that will need to take FID. They will need to be economical. We'll see what the implication on price would be. So what is driving this growth in LNG markets? Several factors. On the supply side, several countries which are not linked to pipelines and are relying on LNG to bridge their requirements as their domestic fields decline. Examples are Bangladesh, Pakistan, for example. Second, LNG imports as a hedge for energy security. Lithuania is a great example. Guess what their first LNG terminal, regas terminal in 2014 was called? It's called Independence. And they used that to actually negotiate Gazprom prices down by 20%. So therefore, LNG is allowing countries to balance their energy portfolio, ensure more energy security. Germany, even Hamburg, is building again an LNG terminal to secure and diversify its portfolio and not just rely on Russian imports through pipelines. On the supply side, massive influx of new capacity. As I mentioned, Australia likely to overtake Qatar, with reaching about 88 MTPA by 2020, 2021. The US going to emerge as a big supplier in the LNG market. Mozambique, there are several projects on the verge of seeking FID. And on the infrastructure side, new modular options. FSRUs, quicker to build, quicker to market, don't have to go through lengthy land acquisition processes. We all know how that works in Indonesia. Again, Indonesia was a pioneer with Nusantara Regas, setting it up way back in 2012. More scalable regas capacity, small scale, which again applies to several islands, the archipelago, and therefore there are more means in which you could bring LNG to market. And also liquefaction technology evolving. FLNG, which was a relatively science fiction concept in the mid-2000s, was made commercial by our friends in Petronas who operated and owned the first FLNG carrier in the world. Shell's building the largest. So therefore, there are many ways to bring gas and LNG to market. And this is therefore profoundly changing the LNG market. If you think about the importing countries, we had 15 countries just 10 years ago. Now we have close to 30. Quantity has doubled. Long-term trade, these were all term contracts. 90% of the market was termed. As I said, it was all a cozy club. Now 30% of it is short-term and spot. And there's more liquidity coming into the market. New business models emerging, traders playing a bigger role, infrastructure being monetized in a different manner through tolling fee, etc. So therefore, multiple new models emerging in the LNG value chain. On the growth side, as I mentioned, 90% plus of the growth is driven by China, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. In 2017 alone, China increased its consumption of LNG from 30 BCM to around 45 BCM, right? Nearly a 50% increase in 1 year. So therefore, that number of 72 that you see till 2030 is definitely happening. Similarly, ASEAN, just between Thailand and Indonesia, you're talking of about a 60 to 70 MTPA market, almost as big as another Japan. However, all of these countries are looking for affordable energy. All of these countries operate in a regime where they cannot pass on the cost directly to customers. There are subsidies in play, and therefore LNG has to be affordable. One of the key drivers why China grew its LNG in 2017 was most of the demand centers are in the east, near the cities of Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and the production is more east and and more east and central, more west and central west. And the cost of LNG was becoming cheaper than just the production cost on the west and central and transportation into those markets. Similarly, India, again, needs affordable energy, and therefore trying to balance out how they can optimize their portfolio. The implication is that therefore these buyers, these markets